You're listening to the Listen Up Show, Startup Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Mitchell Chadro, your host. Today's guest is Jay Mootz on this show, 018. Jay is the Dean and Professor of Law at the University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law in Sacramento, California. And Jay has played a major role in reshaping education in this country. For someone faced with career challenges and tasks, listen up to the way Jay dealt with those issues and came up with various solutions and how you can apply this in your own business or career. He was also Professor of Law and Associate Dean at the University of Nevada of Las Vegas, also William and Mary Law, Associate Dean at Penn State University, Dickinson School of Law. He was a business litigator for Halloran and Sage in Hartford, Connecticut, and after 4 years, he transitioned into academia. He went to Duke Law School. Listen up, trusted friends. It's your business, it's your family, it's your life. Now let's get started. Please sign up to my email list for the latest special offers exclusive for our Listen Up Show Startup Entrepreneur Podcast audience at mitchellchadro.com/sign up. I have been providing business advice, resources, and help to entrepreneurs for over 20 years, and I'm looking forward to helping all of you. Sign up for my email list, again, at mitchellchadro.com/sign up. I will provide you with full transcript for each interview, my ebook, 30 Tools to Start Up, the Startup Checklist, and many other education and training materials, all back at mitchellchadro.com/sign up. Now enjoy the show. Today's show, we interview Jay Mootz, Dean of the McGeorge Law School. We will discuss Jay's journey over the last 26 years of his career and becoming dean. We also talk about the high cost of administration, overhead, and academia, how the silo effect can trap you in certain frames of reference and the need to break out of certain mindsets, how the law school is adding classes for those who don't want to practice law or are more entrepreneurial. We also talk about the student loan debt crisis and the strategies that students can use with higher costs at public schools versus private tuition, taking personal agency over how you manage your debt structure. In addition to the student debt, we explore job prospects and resources provided to the student, creating global international externship and jobs abroad, and providing exposure to other legal systems. We talk about breaking out from the silo focus and using resources that are provided to the student, starting their own practices or obtaining professional employment, building a career as a professional, and what it means to be a professional. Professionals also using social media and leveraging it to their professional way. And now, on to the show. Thanks for joining us, Jay.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Certainly. To Jay, tell us about your journey to become the dean for the McGeorge Law School.
Well, one of the things I've learned in my life is it's important to plan your career, but it's also an impossible task. I was practicing law in Hartford, Connecticut, and I won an award for a little essay on the bicentennial of the Constitution. And I decided to take the earnings and use them to get my master's thesis. I have a master's in philosophy. I wrote about law. I got that typed up and published, and that led to outreach from a professor who said, have you ever thought about being in the academy? And as an undergraduate, I always thought I wanted to be a history professor, so it awakened something. And 26 years later, I'm now the dean of a law school and teaching. So I think what I would say is I always thought of myself as academically inclined, but it was some fortuitous circumstances that led me to where I am now.
Our startup round. For all your hosting needs, head on over to mitchellchadro.com/hosting. mitchellchadro.com/hosting for all your web hosting needs. Who do you use to host this website? Talk to us about the challenges that you faced over these several years as dean.
Well, I became dean I signed my contract January 5th, 2012, which was right about the point in time where legal education was recognizing that we didn't have a blip on the screen, but we had really a structural change that had occurred both in legal practice and it was affecting legal education. And it was pretty intense. I was still on the faculty at UNLV, an associate dean there, but I flew up every Friday from January until my term started on June 1st and actually presented a budget to the president of the university in April before I even technically was dean that proposed cuts, staff cuts. I mean, we had to immediately address the high cost of overhead and restructure the law school. So right from the very first, before I was even formally dean, once I was appointed, it was a very intense experience.
Can you tell us a little bit about the value of dual degree programs and complementary undergraduate degrees based on some of the challenges, especially that you've faced over these years as dean?
Yeah, that's a great question. My degree at Duke in philosophy was part of one of the first joint degree programs. Now they're quite common in law school. And it was great for me, not in a utilitarian sense, but just in a broadening sense. One of the problems we have in higher education is the silo effect, and you get trapped within a particular methodology, frame of reference, set of historical literature. So walking across the Duke campus and taking philosophy courses during the entire time I was in law school, I think it helped me to break out of that mindset. So it's not something that's instrumental in a direct way, but it's more about the great tradition of liberal arts. Is you need to know a little bit about a lot of things, as well as knowing a lot about a focused area in order to be successful. And I have found that has stood me in good stead. And now as dean at McGeorge, I'm really trying to implement the same thing here on our campus. We were a law-only campus. We're now adding other graduate programs, the main universities in Stockton, California. And we're adding within the law school public policy and public administration degrees. We already have a law degree for folks who don't want to practice law, so there's lobbyists and human resource professionals. And I think what we're trying to create here is what joint degree programs were designed to do, and that's to really provide broadening. Even as the JD students are really focused on law, they will have a few classes and some people in their JD classes who come from a different perspective. And I think that's just critical in today's world and economy.
You know, we hear a lot about the student debt crisis, and that's coming down the pike. Can you talk to us a little bit about some student debt strategies that you can impart on the audience, whether they be law students or just college students in general, but just some student debt strategies based on your experience at all of these various universities?
Yeah, and that is a great question, and it's not an easy one to answer. It's very clear that professors are not making all the money that has been added to higher education. Just to give you an example, I believe now the average private law school is charging about 2.5 times what I paid in adjusted dollars when I went to law school. And you say, well, who's taking all this money and how can we control costs? It's really much more on the administrative side of universities rather than professors making $1 million salaries. That's just not the way it works. And the administrative side is because colleges and universities are now very complex organizations. We have Title IX responsibilities to protect the integrity of the campus for all students. We have incredible accreditation reporting requirements. So it's really a very heavily regulated environment that takes a lot of administrative folks to run. Now, could universities be more efficient? Of course, and I think we have to strive to do so. So the first step in addressing student debt is to recognize there really has been a tremendous increase in the actual cost, and that's not easy to solve. The other thing I would urge all students is to very carefully consider adding to their debt. And what I mean by that is it's now possible to borrow living expenses, and students can study abroad in the summer and so forth. This is all great, but I think you really have to take personal agency over the amount of debt you're accumulating, because it's just too easy, I think, over 4 years of undergrad and 3 years of law school to just accumulate far more debt than you might recognize. And so we have excellent summer programs, but we actually try to caution our students, think about the impact on your student debt load. Maybe it would be better to work over the summer rather than have this great summer experience. That will help you too, and it will help you keep your debt under control. But the bottom line is there is no silver bullet. Costs have dramatically increased. There's no easy way to cut them. Students really need to borrow because there are very few families who have this type of cash sitting around. And really what we need is some sort of structural change, and I don't see that happening. We have Bernie Sanders famously arguing for free college tuitions in certain cases. But unlike Europe and South America, most education is privatized. Here in California, the UC system charges private school tuition for law school. So UC Davis is right down the road from my law school. They're a state school. I'm a private school. They charge more for their law school tuition than we do. So we've really privatized graduate education. It's expensive to provide, and in our country, there's not a lot of people who have that kind of cash, so it inevitably leads to student debt. And all I would say is a legal education is a great investment. Just take personal agency, try to minimize your debt, and that's really about it, unless we have a structural change.
You know, there's lots of jobs for U.S. attorneys overseas right now, and I wonder if you're actually developing and training for that specifically.
Well, we here at McGeorge, we have 3 centers of excellence. One of them is global studies or international, and we try to get students into externships and ultimately jobs that are abroad and try to expose them to different legal systems, because that is certainly the case. Even practicing law here in California, you are going to interact with other legal systems, Mexico, the Far East, the EU. So yeah, it's definitely one of my strategies as a dean in our school strategy. And this is not sort of international human rights and just sort of the top end areas that are very important, but also there's only so many positions, but really dealing with transnational business practices, family law issues, and so forth. Immigration, of course, is a huge area of law. And absolutely, I think if you're going to be ready for the modern economy and the modern legal economy, you have to have a sense of what's going on outside our borders.
Now, you mentioned modern economies, but I mean, the role of American law and preparing students in the legal industry, for example, in developing economies, like, for example, India and countries like that, you know, are you expanding, you know, to also include the developing economies as well?
Yeah, we have a very successful summer program in Guatemala, in Antigua, Guatemala, that really tries to understand how law might be able to address some of the issues there. We have some externships available in Africa, and of course that's a big issue. And even some of the EU-type positions we have are really they're rule of law based. The United States has an incredibly important structure where the economy, the political system, everything is structured through law, and it's not that way in the rest of the world. We right now are involved in a collaboration with 3 other U.S. law schools in trying to help Russian law schools learn how to teach experientially, so that legal education traditionally in European and South American countries is much more lecture-based, and the U.S. has really led the way in teaching new lawyers by having them do what lawyers do. So of course, this goes both ways. Right now, for instance, in Mexico, the criminal justice system is moving to an adversarial system. So we can learn as they transition and as they consider certain features of the criminal system to help us understand our system better and some of the weaknesses and how we might change that. So we just had a group of Mexican students on our campus, and we provided, a series of lectures, and we hope to have our students be able to do the same thing at their school. And I think it's beneficial to the other countries, but I want to emphasize it also helps you widen your perspective as a lawyer. And this kind of goes back to the joint degree question. I think always trying to break out of a siloed approach or a siloed understanding is just key if you're going to be a successful lawyer.
On the Listen Up podcast here, we help a lot of, young entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals start up. What are some of the resources for the student here to start their own practice as they transition from graduation to passing the bar and then sort of, having their own practice in the various communities that they're involved in?
That is a great question, Mitchell, and it's one of the things that legal education has not been addressing well in past years. Students, when I first became dean, I met with the Student Bar Association group of officers, and the president said, "Okay, what are you going to do to get us jobs?" And I said, "Well, let's back up. You're creating a professional career. I think in the past we've assumed that lawyers are employees and you go to law school and then someone hires you. And in fact, almost half of lawyers in this country are either solo or two-firm practitioners, and this has always been part of the way our system's structured. And lawyers have the opportunity to be very entrepreneurial. But if you don't structure the education in that way, then it's much more difficult. So one of the first things I did is we do have a law practice management course. The faculty just approved a new required course for all students in the spring of the first year called the Legal Profession, which teaches them it's not really ethics. It's more, what does it mean to be a professional? How do you build a career, a satisfying career as a professional? And then we have things like a small business clinic and, try to shape some of our clinical experiences for students to the kind of practice they're going to face. So they have to learn how to use conflict systems, really sort of the basics of how do you set up a law firm practice. So it's not the substance as much as the structure. And I think that's very important. I haven't practiced law in 26 years, and I use my legal education every day, without a doubt. And I feel it enables me to be an entrepreneurial leader as a dean. And so we want to give that to students, but also some of the technical just knowledge they need to have to understand what it means to be a professional. You're not just a business. You're not just an employee. You are a professional.
Mm-hmm. And, taking it one step further, we talked a little bit about, moving into their own practice, but they're not just an employee, that they're a professional, in terms of, not only helping them find jobs, but creating the opportunities so that they can gain practical experience and begin to help in the law even before they graduate. Maybe talk to us a little bit about some of the ways that you partner the students up with clients before they're even in the community as legal professionals.
Yeah, the primary way is clinics, but that's very intense and somewhat limited in numbers. So the other thing we do here at McGeorge, we require about 15 credits of experiential learning, and we have a whole series of externships. Now, some of these are judicial externships, but we have quite a few that are much more suited for someone who wants to take a more entrepreneurial focus in building their profession. And even a few opportunities after graduation and before the bar results are known, we make it possible for students to work for small firms, small nonprofits, as part of that transition. And really, in the past, there was not much of a transition in legal education. You got hired, the law firm trained you in the way they wanted you to be a professional. And that was never the way that every student experienced it, but it's becoming less and less the case. So we try to provide that both through externships, through the way our career development office works. Our alumni are great. They come back to campus. We have programs all the time. Plaintiff's employment work. What does that look like? What type of work do you do? How do you network? One of our graduates is one of the leading consultants on lawyer use of social media. He's coming down from Seattle in the fall to talk about how you leverage social media in a very professional way, but in a way that gets you out there and gets you connected with people who are looking for your expertise. So it's there's no single strategy, I think. I think it's our job as legal educators to really draw on our alumni, the people out there, and say, help us to ensure that our students understand what that world is like out there. It's not just textbooks. It's you really have to create a professional path for yourself, and we want to give you all the tools to do that.
What are some of your goals and dreams?
Well, I'm pretty old, so.
No, I'm sure you're not that old.
No, I just turned 55, and it's interesting. I've decided I have the 5th year of my dean contract in this coming year, and after that I'm going to return to the faculty. And that's because I feel like I've really done a lot during tumultuous times over the past 4 years, and I've got a year to finish some of those projects. But I really want to get back to the classroom. One of the downsides, when you're an associate dean, you still can teach, you're still involved. As a dean, particularly in these days, it's inevitable that you get disconnected from the basic sort of educational operation. Everything is it's like being a CEO of a small company. And I've decided I didn't want to finish as an administrator. I want to finish as a teacher and someone who, is more deeply involved in individual student success. And I sort of learned that. I have a research assistant right now I'm working with because I do try to still do some scholarship. And it was just great getting to know him. And I taught our new required course in statutes and regulations. The first 2 years it was offered, I taught on our evening program. And it just was too hard to teach and be dean. And I thought, I'm going to do one more year, finish out my 5-year contract, and then my dream is really to be a professor and help shape students' lives on a more individual level. Being dean is important, but I think being on the front lines as a professor is important too. Tell
us some of your career successes. I mean, you say you're 55 and you're going to go back to being a professor after one more year of being dean. But talk to us a little bit about some of your successes.
Well, I'll tell you. And before the podcast began, you reminded me of our connection at Penn State. And in a way, I think my successes are unknown to me because I've made connections with individuals. And then out of the blue, when I became dean here at McGeorge, out of the blue, one of the first students I ever taught in my contracts class reached out and said, "Hey, Dean Mootz, that's great you're a dean. I still remember your contracts class." I think that's the what I would take the most pride in is knowing that, and some students I'm sure had very negative experiences with me. That's the way life is. But that there are a group of folks out there that whether I remember it and they remember it, there was some connection and shaping. Early in my career as a professor, people would say, "What do you do?" And I would say, "I'm a teacher." And they would follow, "What, in grade school and high school?" I'd say, "No, in law school." "Oh, you're a professor." I'm proud to be a professor, but I really think of it as teaching. And it's, so that's very important. I've sort of charted a lonely path in applying some contemporary European philosophy to the legal system and challenging some of the more commonplace approaches. I found that very rewarding to try to bring a different angle to bear. I think in my administrative roles, it's been very satisfying to be a leader and to have faculty and staff say, we don't know exactly where we're going, but you're getting us moving and we're going to sort this out collectively. Unlike a business where you can order people around, faculties are collectives. And getting my faculty here at McGeorge is wonderful. And they came together and really reformed the curriculum. And it wasn't my ideas about how the curriculum should be, or it wasn't me doing it. But I think I do feel proud that I was able to provide the environment through leadership where the faculty really came together and did some important work for our students. So I don't think one thing sticks out in particular, but from the individual student to serving in an administrative capacity, I feel, like it's been a good career, and I want to go back to the individual student part. And, I just had an open house for admitted students here on campus, and I told them what I say to everyone: I don't want to live in a country that doesn't have lawyers. I'm proud of legal education. I'm proud of the role lawyers play. Of course, there are a lot of problems and student debt and what are the job prospects, but essentially, almost my entire career has been devoted to legal education, and I'm very proud to have contributed to that.
Our fast pitch, mitchellchadro.com/books for books, audio books, guest recommendations, and the books that I read to start up each day. Sponsors our Fast Pitch, my book club recommendations, back at mitchellchadro.com/books. To see more of my recommendations and recommendations of our guests, just go to mitchellchadro.com/books. It's your number one resource for book reviews and recommendations. So our first question in this round is, what one thing contributes most to your success?
My education.
And the best business advice you ever got?
My best business advice I ever got was on the first day of being a lawyer when the client said, if I ask you a question, don't say that's a business question, not a legal question, because I know it's a business question. I want your advice. And that really stuck with me, that lawyers are not there to give technical legal responses. They're there to give advice based on a whole variety of things.
Next, so name a book that has helped you either in business, family, or life.
Business, family, or life. This is going to be a strange answer, but I'd have to say The First Circle by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which is a novel about the Gulag in Russia, but it's just chock full of life lessons, and a lot of them have stuck with me.
And the app that you use to help you either in business or family or life, one that you can recommend to our audience?
I am now tweeting and finding that very interesting. So I'm a newcomer to tweeting, but I do find it a very interesting way to engage folks differently. So that would be number one at the moment.
Yep. And a quote or a mantra that you use to inspire and motivate.
How will this help the students?
Because I know the school's motto is lawyers for what's next, which is really cool. A fun fact about you.
Well, I used to be a second-degree black belt. I'm afraid I've gotten away from physical fitness recently, but that's something that sometimes surprises me.
How can people, before we give some parting words of wisdom, maybe that you can provide to the audience as we say goodbye, and then how people can keep in contact with you, Jay?
Parting wisdom. Well, how about something from from the book I just mentioned? One of the prisoners in the Gulag is explaining to another the most important thing in life, and he called it the 1% rule, that everyone can do 99% of a job, but what really sets you apart is when you do 1% of a task or job. And that's always struck me as when you go the extra mile, it pays off down the line somehow. Taking the easy corner cut just is never a good thing to do. So I think I've learned that, and it's definitely paid off for me when I followed that advice. So what was the other question?
And how can people stay in contact with you? Because we'll have all of the notes and all of the links back at mitchellchadro.com/show018. And this way, people can stay in touch with you.
Sure. I'm available at jay.mootz, MOOTZ, at gmail.com. And my Twitter handle is JAYMOOTZ. Love to have folks follow and engage in continuing conversation.
Jay, this has been really super. We all want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that everybody's really going to enjoy it, and we look forward to finding out, what's next for you. So you take care, and we hope to be in touch real soon.
Thank you very much, Mitchell.
Take care now. Bye. Our wrap-up round, mitchellchadro.com/photos for all your graphic design needs. I really had a great time interviewing Jay Mootz, the Dean of the McGeorge Law School. So what did we learn today? It's important to plan your career, but an impossible task because some things are just fortuitous. There's also the high cost of education, which is mostly administration overhead for Title IX and keeping up with the accreditations. Using joint degrees can broaden your experience, which helps students break out of the silo effect, which tends to trap them into a set frame of reference. The McGeorge Law School is adding public policy and public administration courses to expand on the traditional law degree, which offers additional classes from those that for those who don't actually want to practice law and want to, for example, focus on HR or some other aspect of the law. The cost of law school, he said, was actually 2.5 times more in adjusted dollars today than the dean actually paid when he went to law school. For example, the cost to go to UC Davis, which is a public school, is actually more expensive than his private school. Most families just don't have the cash necessary to pay the full tuition, so they need to borrow. However, you must control the amount of debt and take personal agency over accumulating other types of costs, like your living expenses and studying abroad. Sure, there are excellent summer programs, but he cautions students over the debt load, and they may consider working over the summer. There are also 3 centers of excellent global international externship for job creation abroad, which exposes the students to other legal systems. Besides international human rights, there's transactional business issues, transitioning national immigration, and the legal system. They have successful summer programs in Guatemala and externship available in Africa. We also learned collaboration is going on with other law schools in Russia and teaching new professionals by doing versus lecturing. He also talked about the Mexican criminal justice system, which is moving towards an adversarial system, and the University of Pacific has also had Mexican students come to the campus and vice versa. He explains that this actually helped widen the student's perspective. By using joint programs, you can begin to actually break out of the silo focus. He also talks about lawyers. They're actually professionals and not merely employees, whether they're in a solo law practice or working for another law firm. Entrepreneurial programs created and programs developed in management help build careers as professionals. He talks about clinic on how to set up a practice and enables the dean to also be entrepreneurial. Talks about what it means to be a professional, and also he talks about going back to teaching because he wants to get more deeply involved with the student. He says that it's hard to teach while also being dean, and his dream is being a professor on the front lines. On success, Jay says that most of his successes are unknown. For example, out of the blue, a student reaches out and tells him that he remembers the contract class and how much he helped him. Further, he states, "I don't want to be in a country that doesn't have lawyers." The best business advice was when one of his clients said, "If I ask you a question, don't say it's a business question. I'm only looking for your advice and want you to use all your skill sets to answer my questions." He now uses Twitter to engage differently with his students, and those are just a few of the things that we learned today. We're really looking forward to our next show where we interview Bruno Virle, the founder of Genius. I look forward to our next show with all of you, my trusted friends. In closing, let me ask for my listeners' help. First, please subscribe to my email list at mitchellchadro.com/signup. You will get all the full interview transcripts, my ebook, 30 Tools to Start Up, where I talk about these free resources in show 006. You'll get the startup checklist, education and training materials, and other resources just by signing up at mitchellchadro.com/signup. Listen up, trusted friends. It's your business, it's your family, it's your life. Go out and live it. Back at mitchellchadro.com/signup, help me boost the rankings of the Listen Up Show, the Startup Entrepreneur Podcast, by providing a well-written review in iTunes. mitchellchadro.com/iTunes. It helps other people find the show. If you actually need instructions on how to do this, you can find that back at mitchellchadro.com/signup. Thank you so much for subscribing to my email list and providing a written review on iTunes. Until next time.